I don't need to affect change in the world by just getting a degree and being able to become a professional or build a career in a space. I can affect change in any industry in any way just by linking technology to solving a really real problem for people.
Hey, Bulelani Balabala here. Welcome to the Small Business Podcast. We bring you weekly information, practical skills, and mentorship from industry professionals. This podcast is powered by T, an initiative that has directly impacted over 50,000 plus small businesses nationwide. This podcast is for small business owners who want to start, run, and grow their business. Follow us on all our social media platforms. #JoinUs4T. Every Wednesday is a new podcast. Hey, what's up, guys? Sanbonani, good day. How's it, man? Thank you for joining us for the Small Business Podcast, man. This new week, we've got an amazing fellow in studio. Just chatting to us. I mean, a guy I really appreciate, I look up to, whose work I extensively follow, his passion for small business, building communities, and really just outright creating an enabling environment for entrepreneurial voices to shine, to thrive, and I think most importantly for them to, access markets. And I think I've seen him drive for that through, his work at Yoco in enabling small businesses that are on the Yoco platform to be used as service providers for various initiatives. And that, for me, is at the heart of building a startup, a small business community that really thrives on spreading the money in and around ourselves. And I think that's one of the most important things that we need to do. I've got Mashudu Modau in studio, a youth entrepreneurship evangelist. A very, I'll put a very here because there's no very, a very influential voice in the small business community. And he's also the founder of Founders Source and a podcast host on Lutcha. Follow Lutcha. You guys must go out and check out Lutcha. They've got a series and a host of other podcasts from sporting to business to just life and everything DIY out there. Just check that out. He's also the community partnerships manager at Yoco. He connects people and builds platforms to help African entrepreneurs grow. Brother.
That's a mouthful, bro.
Finally, we sit down. We always WhatsApp. We call, hardly call.
But we still work, though.
Nonetheless, we work.
That's the most important thing. Like,
how are you, bro?
I'm good. I think it's been a crazy start to the year.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that, but otherwise, I'm good.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think for me, it's a total honor to have you in studio, right? Just tell me a bit about yourself. I mean, where's Mashuru from?
Sure. You literally just said the whole bio. So I'm Soweto born and bred. Grew up in Diepkloof Zone 2. It's like just, I think, one of the best places to grow up. I think it gives you like a perspective on the world that most places don't. And I think like people underestimate the power of that. I definitely claim that as being part of the reason why I do the work that I do, and like the experiences I had in that early sort of development phase like really shaped who I am today. So yeah.
Now, one of the things that I sort of read up, right, on your bio, talking about who you are, where you're from, is you didn't like school. So I didn't like school at all.
Yeah.
And and I think I sort of attributed most of that to, I guess, just being wired differently. But just tell me a bit. I mean, I think at an infancy stage, through your passion for community development and just driving impact across the board. I mean, you started Big Sister, Big Brother. Just tell us a bit about that. I know it's long ago, but...
Yeah, so like I think because I wasn't so, engaged in school, I tried to find things I could do that really engaged me, right? So starting projects at school that could engage me and keep me just like expressing myself in an interesting way, right? Yeah. I've always cared about mentorship. I've always cared about what it means to pass on, lessons, or, the term people are using now is send the ladder down. Like, I think back then I didn't have the knowledge to even say that or the language to say that, but I think that's what I've always been focused on, right? So in high school, I started that program, Big Sister, Big Brother, mainly because I wanted to see, when people go from primary school to high school, they usually have a very traumatic experience to transition, right? So, very much the typical boys' school treatment of initiation, right? So, we initiating you into high school by violently shaking your expectations of what this is. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. What does it look like to partner, young grade eights in the very first week of their experience with people that are in, say, matric or whatever it is, that have like a level head on them and like really have a perspective on the world that they could share with someone else to enable them to actually, have a better experience through high school. I always think mentorship is the most underestimated form of self-development that there is, right? Like you get the right mentor at the right time, you can really have a very transformative journey through any experience. And I don't mean this in the sense of like when you're a business owner, you get a mentor who has, who's a billionaire and then somehow that translates to you being successful. I mean that in the sense that in every field, in every aspect of life, you need people that are older than you that can guide you, people that have achieved the things that you care about, that can really shape the direction of your journey, people that can influence the direction of your journey. And you've seen it across, life as you grow up, how important it is to have that right network, and that network being really impactful mentors is a massive, massive like advantage for anyone.
Yeah. And then I think just off there's a series of questions I want to ask, right? But just off this now latter one, right, around mentorship, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs, right, struggle with the whole mentorship conversation because so a lot of them would then say, I think some of the two main challenges would be, how do I find a mentor? And then I guess number 3 would be the conflict for most individuals who want to free up their time and offer themselves up to be mentors, but they've got a bit of a problem to say, but I want to offer my time, but how do I manage the relationship in such a way where it's beneficial and it's value for time, and I know that I'm giving out the time and we can measure it intrinsically.
Yeah. So with the first one, right, like the way I found all my mentors was really being in spaces where I thought people that were doing the work I wanted to do would be, right? So my mentors ended up being the people that were judging the pitching competitions that I was competing in, right? So I'd be there and I'd fail in the pitching competition, but I'd see someone that was like, yo, man, the things you're doing is where I'm trying to get to. You see me competing, you see me showing up, trying, building things. I'd really love your guidance to try and do the same, right? Like I want to get to where you are. What does it look like for me to get there with the work that I'm doing now, right?
Yeah.
So I think being in the spaces where your mentors or the people that you really admire would be in is a really great way to start off with. Secondly, with that second question, and like I'm going to round this up, with that second question, I think people don't realize that mentorship needs to be more of an exchange rather than a one-way relationship.
Yeah.
If you approach a mentor and you say, hey, I want to get to where you're getting, where you're going, where you are at, and I have nothing else to offer, I just want to be where you're at, and I just want to take from you, that's a terrible way to start any relationship, right? Like you don't start a friendship that way. You don't start a relationship that way. When you start working with anyone in business, you don't start that way. You start by saying, hey, here's the value I have to add. I think that I can add something to what you're doing, but I also want to learn from you. I want to be able to access the spaces you're in, but like I want to make sure this is an exchange. It's not just like I'm going to take from you as much as I possibly can and just walk away like super successful. So I do think that when you change your thinking from, okay, I want to exchange value with this person, as much as I want to learn from them, I'm still offering something to them, right? So, one of my earlier mentors, like when I wanted him to be my mentor, I was basically courting him, right? Like I remember I saw that it was his birthday on Facebook.
Sorry.
And I saw him at a coffee shop that same day, which is like just by accident. So I just walked in and I was like, hey, what birthday cake do you want? He was like, oh, no, I like chocolate, whatever. Literally just went to the counter, bought him that, gave it to him and left. Didn't speak to him. And then he posted about that. It was like, oh, man, this was really sweet. And for him, it was just like, wait, man, this kid's actually trying to, show me that, look, I see you beyond just what you do and what access you can give me. You're a human being. You're someone that genuinely needs or, deserves to be given flowers in some ways. So I think finding those ways where you can exchange value with someone that you admire are incredible opportunities for you to be able to do so much more, and be able to find the right people and be in those right spaces as well. Yeah.
Now, no, I'm not going to ask that, but I'm just going to I'm going to track back to the first question, right? When did the bug first bite for you to suddenly realize, you know, of everything I'm going to hone into, of everything I'm going to focus in, my primary focus is going to be advocating for small business wherever I go and whatever I do?
Sure. I think when I started to pay attention to the unemployment stats,
Yeah.
you know, I think you hear those numbers when you're a kid and it's like, oh, it's just numbers.
Yeah.
Then you grow up and you see, you know, your cousin's not working for 5 years, and you see, like, you know, people are going out of school and they have nowhere to turn. And you start to see, wait, man, like something's wrong, something's broken. And I started to pay attention to those numbers so much that like they became an obsession for me, right? Like I was constantly thinking about, hey, what does it look like to impact this thing? What does it look like to actually drive change somewhere here? Like, can I actually affect something here? And that's where I found I think entrepreneurship, unfortunately, is one of those things that it hits you very early in life and you realize that there's nothing else that's going to like make sense for your life.
Fulfill.
Like it hits you, like you're like, yes, yeah, no. Nothing else is going to like...
Yeah.
If you try and get me to, you know, study a course or something like that, like a very serious course or anything like that, I struggle, right? It's because I just don't know how to engage in the world in that way, in that very traditional education way. But I dedicate myself to learning, right? So with entrepreneurship, I was studying economics at the time, right? So economics and econometrics, there was no business studies in the sort of modules or anything like that. So it was everything else. And I just found myself studying that stuff a lot more, right? Trying to understand Silicon Valleys, trying to understand startups, understanding the difference between small businesses versus startups, understanding what this entrepreneurship thing is. Why do entrepreneurs exist? Why do small businesses exist? What's the impact that they have on the world? I learned as much as I possibly could about that stuff. And then I started going into sort of how technology was going to shift everything about small business and entrepreneurship and startups and all of that, like how that would influence entire generations. And early on, I was just thinking about, hey, let's go onto the internet. Let's figure out how we can do something for other people with it, right? So, you know, the first thing I ever started was called Papershare. This is after the high school projects, right? And this is when, like, this is the real world now. You go into the world. I remember I just went to the IT or like the computer science department at UJ and just stalking programmers, literally just standing at the door and going, hey, are you a programmer? Can you make a website? I asked about 5-10 guys, and then this one guy was just like, yeah, I can build you a website. I was like, how much? It's like 2,000 Rand. I was like, okay, cool. And then we built this thing where matriculants could download past papers, right? It was called Papershare. I actually bought back that domain like 2 weeks ago. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we built this thing, and then I emailed or DM'd on Facebook and Twitter about 100 South African celebrities, right? And just sent it out. And the only person that responded and posted the actual thing to say, hey guys, you should check out this kid's website was Trevor Noah. And then like overnight, we had 50,000 people use the website to download past papers and start sharing them amongst themselves. That was the moment I was like, oh crap. I don't need to affect change in the world by just getting a degree and being able to become a professional or build a career in a space. I can affect change in any industry, in any way, just by linking technology to solving a really real problem for people and being able to find the business amongst it, right? So that early in my journey, I knew nothing about how to do that, right? I didn't understand how to turn an idea into a business, into a scalable business, into a startup, and, you know, all these things, right? So that was just like that learning journey. And because of the success or like the growth of that small little project, right, I got into an incubation program. And this was my first experience of the South African, you know, startup and development ecosystem for entrepreneurs, for small businesses, for startups, right? And navigating that space was so difficult, bro. Like, I remember how difficult it was back then. And by back then, I mean like 6-7 years ago. It's not even that old, right?
Yeah.
Even 10 years ago. it's so hard for you to just find help as an entrepreneur, right? Like, can you just go find help?
Yeah.
I remember just it being so difficult to just go, okay, I clearly have a great idea here, right? Like, if 50,000 people use something, there needs to be something of value that can be built from that.
Yeah.
And I got into the program where they really were training us around, okay, here's how you turn, that amount of users into actual customers. How do you, take your idea from, okay, I thought of this thing. Can I actually understand whether or not there's a problem to solve here? And is there an addressable market big enough for me to build a scalable business, right? Like, very simple, like, bare bones basics of what you should understand as an entrepreneur. But navigating that space and not being able to find the right help at the right time, not being able to get things funded, not being able to get a space to work in even sometimes, right? Like, I always say that there's a generation of South African entrepreneurs that are celebrities now, but 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we were closing down coffee shops, right? Like, because we would go into coffee shops, buy one coffee, and you're there working the whole day.
That's very true.
Because that was just the hustle. It was just like, yo, I just need Wi-Fi. I need a Wi-Fi connection, and I need a space where I can actually be able to work. That's all you needed, right? And those two things had such a massive influence on, like, my experience. And because of the difficulties of that entire journey, I was like, no. There needs to be a better way for other people to navigate this ecosystem.
Yeah.
We should have an ecosystem map, something that breaks down where are the places that you can work from, where are the incubators, what are incubators? Why should people even be thinking about an incubator? Why should people think of accelerators? All these different things. I was trying to, like, break down each and every term, trying to make people understand what they were, at what stage you needed to be at in order to join those things, how you could find those things, and also just, like, spending a lot of my time just sharing resources I was finding in the ecosystem, because I was just like, there needs to be work that needs to be done to make sure that we're breaking down the ecosystem to serve the people that actually need it. And I think that's a massive thing.
Yeah. And I think for me, just and I think just on the back of what you've just mentioned now, right? When you sort of look at the ecosystem, I think primarily from the point of how corporates are sort of supporting small businesses and are sort of creating and enabling corporates and brands, right? Are sort of creating an enabling environment. Do you sort of feel like a lot of corporates are sort of now jumping onto the bandwagon of supporting and assisting entrepreneurs, or do you feel like there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and what does that work sort of look like for you?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about the ecosystem in South Africa now, we need to talk about it in the context in which COVID damaged it, right? Like, we need to, like, actually go back, right? Like, we need to discuss the fact that there was about 3 incubators or entrepreneurial spaces that vanished from Braamfontein. Where are those entrepreneurs? Where are those creators? Where are those people, right? Like, no one's talking about the fact that overnight there was a situation where people that went to an office in order to access resources, in order to build their businesses, had nowhere to go. Like, we need to go back first. Like, and I think, the progress that was made in the last, say, 5 to 10 years needs to be, like, reassessed, because we're in a different, landscape than we were back then. Where we are now is like, hey, guys, we need to make sure that people understand that there was massive damage to the ecosystem, and now it needs to be rebuilt again.
Yeah.
And you need to, re-energize it, right? Like, I think that we're lacking energy again, man. Like, I think there's a lot of trauma that's come from COVID that's affected not just entrepreneurs or small businesses, but even the people that help to support and train those people, right? Like, you need to understand, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people found themselves in a situation where they couldn't do the work that they cared about, which was, hey, I'm actively every single day contributing to the success or growth or development of small businesses, right? All those people and all that sort of ecosystem energy needs a reset, a restart, and a refresh to go, okay, guys, what is gone? We need to start over. What does it look like to rebuild? Because a lot of things were lost, and we really need to think about those things. I think a really big thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about, and like, this is where a lot of the development needs to happen now, is how do we get tech startups to come out of Soweto? How do we get tech startups to come out of Guyana? How do we get them out of Tembisa? How do we get them out of, Deep Guamash, wherever it is? Because there's a reality where there's a gap in terms of what people understand to be small businesses versus startups, whatever it is. But there's a resource gap in how people can access certain things in order to be able to even know the language of these things. You need to be exposed to the startup world. You need to be exposed to entrepreneurship. You need to be exposed to small business. You need to be exposed to all these things, because if you don't have that exposure and that someone going, hey, this is what a business is, this is how it works, this is why you start one, this is how it looks like if you actually make it work. How do you figure out if there's a problem to solve? How do you figure out how many people actually need that solution? All these things are things that really matter in the context of how things are built. And I just don't think that information and those resources are reaching the people that it needs to, right? Like, it needs to go far deeper, right? Like, South Africa has, someone explained this to me, and this was a super successful Nigerian entrepreneur. It's like, his experience of South Africa's ecosystem is that there's three, right? So there's the super well-funded, incredibly resourced ecosystem that exists in sort of Stellenbosch area, right? Stellenbosch, Cape Town, super resourced entrepreneurs that are testing and learning as much as possible to try and build technology startups that can serve mass people, right? And then you've got the second ecosystem, which is mainly just like an ecosystem that serves people that can access the resources. That's people like me and you, right? So we can access a computer, you can get onto Wi-Fi, you can do certain research, you can sort of build something and be able to start testing things, right? And then the third ecosystem is the ecosystem where people aren't served at all or are underserved, right? So, and in that ecosystem, it's more focused on small business. And that's where you see the role now changing of going, okay, if small business development isn't coming from the organizations that used to exist, that were wiped out by the pandemic, if it's not coming from government, because government has a much bigger focus on, okay, can we create jobs, but maybe not necessarily just with small businesses, but can we find a different way? Where's the actual support coming from? You're starting to see like companies like Yoco, and full disclaimer, I work at Yoco. I'm a community partnerships manager, and I do really amazing work there. And, I think you've seen Yoco, in that sort of 2020, 2021 period, step into the role of saying, hey, look, man, we don't have a mandate from any citizens. We don't have any sort of, government mandate or anything that's defining our movement. We have a clear vision. So the vision is enable people to thrive. Sharp. Your job now is to, how do we serve small businesses? And that's what they dedicated themselves to. I think that South Africa's ecosystem is going to fast move towards more of that model where you're starting to see very private companies or individuals, right? Me in my own personal capacity, when the pandemic hit and all these things were happening, me and my 3 friends were like, hey, guys, what can we do? And we're like, okay, can we help small businesses start building their businesses online? So everyone that was trading in person can move to online. Can we help them figure out how to build an online store, be able to build a couple? So we built about 10 for 10 small businesses every week. I don't remember what period that was. And every week we built a small business or online store. We made an entire guide about this. Hey, here's how you build an online business, and how you actually move your business online. And you're going to start seeing this a lot more in the ecosystem where individuals, groups of individuals, or private companies start to go, okay, there's a problem that we need to solve here, especially around small business development, entrepreneurship development, startup development, where we can play a role to enable people to build the things that they care about and not necessarily wait for other people to be able to step into that role.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I really hope that young South Africans have already adjusted themselves to realizing that, hey, man, the help's not going to come from someone else anymore. Like, that's just the reality. And what we need to navigate now is the world where the help might not come at all. So what are you going to do about that? Like, that's the reality that faces us, right? Yeah. Like, every entrepreneur you could speak to that survived the pandemic with their business, if you ask them, hey, man, how did you get help? A lot of it will be like, hey, man, we tried to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
We're
true.
just things just happened. And the reality of where the ecosystem is now is like most people's experiences is going to be that.
Yeah. And then, I think from your sort of interaction, and you're someone who interacts with quite a a lot of small businesses, right? Do you sort of feel like they get that, right? The fact that you are on your own. There's no cavalry that's coming. There's no help that's coming. That you need to find ways of sort of starting where you are with what you have, right? Because I think the sort of challenge is that when you sort of look at the socioeconomic landscape of South Africa, it's such that it's dependent on grants, it's dependent on a government that's going to come and save the day. But from a small business perspective, there's no government that's going to come and save the day. I mean, we sort of see it with how the Department of Small Business is just in shambles and they're not even being able to meet their KPIs.
Yeah. So look, man, and I think there is some grace to be given to government for the initiatives that they do have that are effective, that I think that in their ability to drive change and actually be productive, they should get a lot more airtime than the mistakes, than everything else, right? And I think we need to try and find a balance between that criticism versus, okay, wait, guys, there is a program that's, helping small-scale farmers or anything like that, right? Like, I think there's an important perspective where there are people that are being assisted.
Yeah.
We might not just be the people that are in those spaces, right? I think that people are realizing there's a reality where you might have to start, build and grow your business completely independently without the help or assistance of government or other organizations, except for those that enable you to do business, right? So you're going to need a bank, you're going to need a speed point if you need that sort of service, you're going to need a payments provider, you're going to need a accounting software, you're going to need all these sort of resources. The interesting thing I think that's happening now is like all these companies that provide these services are understanding that their actual job is not just to provide those services to the businesses that can access them. Their actual job is to build or grow that market, right? So how do we get even more people starting businesses? How do you get more people actually registering their businesses and becoming more formal? How do you get those people to start actually scaling those businesses to much larger sizes, right? Like there's now an investment from those companies to go, okay, we need to empower as many small businesses as possible so that we can actually grow the market. And I think from an entrepreneur side, and like I interact with a lot of entrepreneurs, the sad thing and the reality that they've confronted is like, okay, the help's not going to come. So now we need to figure it out from that standpoint. That's your base. Your base is that I won't get help. So now you navigate that. And I think like that's where the power of communities comes in. So I consider you as part of a community and like the Township Entrepreneurship Alliance as being a community, Yoco's community. I think there's a lot more of these, right? Like just small pockets of people that are building businesses in very similar areas that start to enable each other in very smart ways. So a very interesting one, let me think about Brown Sense.
Yeah.
You think about Brown Sense a couple of years ago,
yeah.
it was such an impactful platform, right? Like that was a place where if you needed to show your product to a group of people to say, hey guys, I'm doing this interesting thing. Can you just, give feedback? Can you, buy some things? Can you advise me? These are the spaces where the actual impact is happening. And you think about organizations like, Township Entrepreneurship Alliance or the Hookup Dinner or very many others, right? Where you don't necessarily have the support of government for those programs, but those programs are affecting change in communities. And those are the people you need to be gravitating towards. Go to the communities of people that are building businesses in the areas where you care about and start to form those small communities where you guys can actually start to exchange things, right? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, hey, I'm selling this, can you buy it? Sometimes it can just be, hey, man, can I learn from you, right? Like, what are you doing to increase your sales? How are you marketing your business?
Yeah.
What are the things you're navigating in terms of challenges, right? Like, all these things start to be things you can use, information, skills, insights that you can use in your business to justify or like start to navigate a lot smarter. You don't need to always be in a program. I do encourage it though. There's so many resources online now versus back then, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's true.
it's insane, right?
No,
like
it's
you
very
could
true,
learn
yeah.
to run a business off of TikTok now.
Yeah, no,
or
that's
even
very true.
or Instagram, right? Or like on YouTube. Go on there and learn from people. I think that is like the power now, the power comes from communities and people starting to organize around the fact that, okay, I run this, you run this. Can we figure out a way that we can leverage each other, learn from each other, and be able to trade in some way? And then we can start to grow a much bigger community and start to like really, affect change in a serious way.
I think and I think I quote this a lot, right? When I'm engaging corporates and I get the opportunity to engage corporates and talk about where they are in terms of our index and the township and their support and all that stuff. And I think the example that is always there is how Yoco, and I think it's the incredible work you guys have done in building a community and resourcing the community. So in resourcing it beyond what I'd called beyond the call of duty, right?
Yeah.
So here's our company and here's our product focus, but we'll go talk to you about how to market your business. We'll go and invest in how you sort of shape your business online. We'll go and engage you in terms of how you can attract customers. And I think it goes back to sort of what you're mentioning, right? In and around building that community. But I mean, to an entrepreneur, to entrepreneurial enablers that are sort of listening to this podcast, right? Maybe they're sort of sitting there, they're thinking to themselves, building a community means I need a wad of people around me, right? Mm-hmm. How can they build this community? And then how can they manage the sort of development and growth of those various communities that they build in various parts of the country and the world?
Like the internet is such a beautiful place, right? And like, I think you can use so much of the internet to build your community and like keep it there, right? So one of the biggest platforms that has become, a big community builder is Discord. And this is just a chat app, very chatty, right? Like, but it's very hacker, the way it looks and the way it interacts. And basically the first thing you need to do is be able to set like a very clear initial intent about why you guys are organizing, right? Like you need to be able to justify, okay, guys, why are we forming this community?
Yeah.
What does it actually mean? What are we trying to achieve here collectively? There's certain things we can achieve individually, but there's something that's much bigger or much more impactful that can happen when we organize together, right? Like, I think that is at the core of any community, is the fact that there's a monster that we are all fighting together to be able to overcome something and like actually drive action, right? So this big idea, what's that first initial big idea? So when I started sort of building communities, my first initial one was just like something like enable people to enable each other, right? So like put people in a space where they can actually start to make the connections that help each other make some form of progress. So it's not enough to just organize people in a room, right? To say, okay, guys, we are all here. We all believe in something. What happens next? You need to be able to drive action, right? So what does that action to being able to solve that big problem actually is, right? Like start organizing people around that. And whether that organizing is in a room or it's in a chat room or it's a Twitter space or it's a, whatever it is, you guys need that sort of consistent interaction, engagement to understand each other's problems and how, not just each other's problems, but each other's like strengths to be able to go, okay, there's the opportunity. Here's where something can actually work for us to build something even better, right? I think that you can go much further and much faster towards the thing that you really care about if you're a part of community versus when you do it alone. Entrepreneurs that lone ranger this, I always think they struggle a lot more because the day things get bad, you have no one to lean to, right? Like, you have no one to be able to go, hey man, look, we didn't hit any sales this month. We're going to make a loss. What does it look like to recover from this? How do I make my calculation to understand, is this business still viable? Because every single day that you're making massive decisions, sometimes, you have your own biases and you think your own perspective is the right one. But just listening or just reaching out to one person and saying, hey, I was thinking of doing this, but what do you think it looks like for me to do this? And like, what do you think the result will be? You'd be very surprised by the answers that people give you, like from different experiences. Because the guy that's worked at an agency his whole life in a creator sense, when you pitch him on an idea versus another guy who's worked in very, systematic corporate, organizations, those two answers are going to be very different.
Yeah,
the perspective is going to be very different. But you're going to take something from both those people that's going to be able to give you some value where you're like, oh, wait, I can think about this differently, right? So cultivating that community, it starts with just communicating that initial intent and that big monster that you're fighting. So my big monster is like, I want to be able to enable other people to navigate South Africa's startup ecosystem easier. That's a simple thing, right? Like build a platform to do that, where if someone goes onto one platform, they can figure out where they can work, what resources are available, what people can help them, who they should be contacting, all that stuff, right? Very simple. Organize them around a certain event or like certain space. We'll do a Twitter space, we'll do a podcast, we'll do Instagram live, whatever it is, to organize those people that, understand the problem that we're trying to solve, and then go, okay, guys, how do we start to really improve this, right? And you'll start getting, even for our platform, people write articles for free because they're just like, listen, here are the top 20 investors that are looking at startups in South Africa. No one knew this before we put it up, right? Like, hey, this is important. Why is no one else talking about these things? And very specific, right? So you go down to, okay, who are the people helping people fund their businesses in Pretoria specifically, or Mamelodi specifically? And if we can get that granular and people can navigate the entire ecosystem without having to, call a friend or really reach out in some other way, then we've done our job, right? Like we need to make it as easy as possible for people to find the resources and the help that they need when they need it in order to drive success in their business or be able to grow in some way.
Now, being someone like you, right? Someone who's wholly driven in creating, right? I think one of the biggest challenges, right, with a lot of creators is, I guess, it's not a challenge, it's a gift and a curse. It's the insatiable hunger to create. But in most cases, you find that you sort of deal at challenges and issues alone. How do you sort of work around, personally, the self-doubt and imposter syndrome, but also just primarily, just keeping your head in the game because you're dealing with a lot of stresses. And I think primarily the stress of where you can be, where you should be, but you're just not there now. And it's frustrating because this thing is perfect, this thing is working, but you're just not getting to where you need to go now.
Like this is one of those times where I'm very happy to admit I don't know the answer to that. Because like I suffer from that a lot, right? Like constantly questioning the value of the work that you're putting out because that it can always be better, it can always be more, or you can always drive bigger impact. Or I think being very clear on the intention for which you do anything. So why are you doing anything at all, right? Like answer that question first, because once you have that question answered and you have a clear intent or why, which everyone talks about, find your why, find your why, find a why. It's because in the worst of times where you're doubting the work that you're putting out, being an imposter, where you feel like you're fighting imposter syndrome, you're fighting just, self-doubt and just self-critique and all of that, the thing that's going to anchor you is the reason why you're doing everything. Right?
Yeah.
And if it's not a strong reason, it's going to fall apart, and everything falls apart if you don't test it enough, right? So it is worth it to take the time and make the effort to not even just like figuring it out yourself, but figuring it out with someone else, whether that's a friend, someone you're in a relationship with, or a business coach or a mentor, where you're like, hey, this is why I want to do something. And they say, but that's not a big enough reason. And it's worth it to interrogate, like, why are you doing things, right? Like, I think that a lot of people wouldn't find themselves in very deeply challenging situations where, they're working on things that they don't care about. And it's mainly because they haven't taken the time to like, hey man, but why am I doing this? Because if you don't have that reason, like it's going to fall apart very quickly. And I think with this sort of small business, entrepreneurship, startup space, I have a very clear like, okay, this is my clear, right? Like I know why I'm doing this and why it will never stop. Why I don't need someone else to pay me to share resources about small business. That's not my price. Because the price there is the impact that I actually am able to drive. Because that impact leads to much bigger wins, right? So I think about those sort of calculations on every single decision is like, can I drive impact here? And what does that impact look like? Can it be measured? Can I actually take this and package it and say to people, hey, this is what I've done? And in those moments of doubts where, I'll build something, put it up, and then no one cares about it, I'm like, okay, but why did I do that? You know, like recently I built, you know, that paper share domain I was telling you about. So I built it, and I built it into the ultimate guide for monetizing your content as a content creator on any platform. So there was like 4 guides for Instagram, how to monetize your stories, and then how to sell on Instagram, and how to become a influencer stuff. And then I did one for Twitter, which was talking about like promotions, and then also just spaces and stuff like that. And then I did one with Facebook. So it was complete monetization guide across all platforms. And when I put it out, I didn't get the reception I wanted. So I was like, oh man, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't it work? And I was like, it took me time to realize that I made it out of a place of ego, just to say that I launched something else, instead of taking this. Really, it's a feature, right? Like, it's a really cool feature, but it's not its own product. So what that means is it works really great as just a creator guide inside Founder's Source, instead of its own platform with its own journey and its own audience. It didn't need to be an entire new business, right? So I took that entire website like down, was able to preserve all the content, and then just put it onto Founder's Source as a creator guide. So when you click creator on Founder's Source, it just shows you all these monetization guides: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. And it's like, sometimes you need to be able to investigate, you know, where the source of the reason why you're doing something is, right? Like, and if it's not a good intent, and it's not coming from, I'm solving the problem even better than I was before, or it's not aligned to the reason why you're doing everything else, you need to question that. So there's a lot of ego that also comes with entrepreneurship, but there's also a lot of room for humility. There's a lot of room for reflection, meditation, slowing down. So my new thing is just like slowing down, slow down. Why? Because for the last how many years, you know, everyone's learning from, you know, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all these businesses that really look like they were here today and then they were just like skyrocketed tomorrow. It's like, no,
4 or 5
that's
years
not what
gone.
happened.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. Yoco's been around since 2013. People think about it like, oh no, he enjoy company. Yo, man, guys have been hustling, right? Like, you think about that number, like 2013, it's 2022 now, right? And you need to be able to start looking at things from that perspective, where you slow things down. You be clear on the reason why you're doing things. And like, when things work out, you express gratitude. When like good things happen, you are present in those moments. Because this idea that you need to run as fast as possible in order to build a business, in order for it to be successful, in order for it, you know, to reach the heights that it needs to, it's broken, right? Like, it's the thing that's causing so much burnout. It's the thing that's causing a mental health crisis amongst creators and small business owners and entrepreneurs, right? Like, those people are genuinely the people who neglect their mental health the most, because the doctrine is run as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Build as fast as possible, make as fast as possible, create but that's not how like the real world works. That's not how your mind works. That's not how your heart works. It all needs you to slow down. Like, sometimes you need to take your time, set a very clear vision, a very clear intent. Why are we doing this? Because once you get that right, everything else that you have to face in order to make it happen, it feels so much lighter. It feels so much lighter.
Now, Mash, just 2 last questions, right? And I think we need to do this again. Long. Ball of wisdom, follow this man. Now, if you had the opportunity to engage your younger self, what would you tell your younger self to do more of?
Get online earlier. So like, I think people underestimate the power of online platforms and what it can do for you. And, you know, the other day I was just, you know, going through the people that follow me, because, you know, the biggest thing that people misunderstand about social media is the idea that you need more people following you and instead of the right people. The other day I was going through who was actually following me, and one of the people that follow me is the CEO of Complex. Complex is this massive media company from America. Obviously, you know it, but maybe your audience might not. But like, and I looked at that guy following me. I was like, wow, that's insane, right? Like, that's amazing, because I'm trying to build a business like that. And he's right there. Just a simple message, just a DM, just to say, hey man, look, I admire the work that you've done over the many years that you've done it, and it's incredible what you've achieved. I'm trying to build this in Africa. What advice do you have? Because the more you make those connections with the people that you really care about and the people that are actually your tribe, the faster your growth journey can be, right? So I think that, like I said earlier, communities accelerate growth, right? Communities accelerate growth. The more communities that you're part of, and the right communities as well, right? Like, you can't just be part of everything. You need to be part of the spaces where you know you're going, or you actually belong. The most important thing for me was just like finding my tribe, and that just would not have happened if I wasn't on the internet. So very early on, I was on Mixit, I was on Facebook, and on Facebook, I remember just going, you know what? I'm going to try and add every person I admire as a friend on Facebook. It was this very simple strategy, because back then people didn't care who was on their Facebook, right? It wasn't serious. So I just added all these friends. Those people are now some of the most important people in the creator space. Those are the important people in small business development. Those are the people building really cool startups. Same thing with LinkedIn. I did the same thing. Tried to add all the companies that I really, really admired, the CEOs, the people that are working in marketing, because like I really like that space, right? And I followed all those people and I added them as a connection on LinkedIn. And on Twitter, I try to do the same. And then every now and then, I'll promote their stuff without them even knowing that I'm going to do it, right? Like, because there's this perception that once you reach a certain following that you should be doing everything for money. I'm like, no. Choose a goal that you can really, really commit to, like, very long term, right? Like 10, 20 years. This is a goal I've been committed to for the last, I don't know how many already, but I'm going to be committed to it for at least another 20. Very clear goal, right? Can I enable as many people to thrive? That's my job. At Yoco, that's my job. And outside of my job, that's what I do, right? Like, I enable people to thrive. I'll build Founder Source, where we have all the resources for anyone to start a startup or build a business. That's it. And then keep doing that. Like, run a podcast, do a YouTube video, whatever. But it's all around the same thing, which is like, why are we doing this? Very clear. Okay, here it is. If you get that clear vision, get online as quickly as possible, build the communities that you really care about, and start to share your voice a lot sooner as well. I think that people wait until they can justify themselves as experts before they can have an opinion on something. It's like, no. We're all learning. Everyone's in the process. Share that journey of you actually learning about something, like that journey of you processing what it actually means. I think the mistake we make is to wait until we have a victory lap before we start to share our journey.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. Share the process, because that process, the people that stick around for that process until you win, they're going to win with you.
Yeah,
and they're going to want you to win, right?
That's
like,
true.
that's a very different journey to like, you don't know I exist, and then tomorrow you see me on a victory lap. You're like, how? Who's this now? Where did he come from? And now I'm telling you my story, and you're not sure if it's true, because everyone invents all sorts of things, right? Like, it's like, if you show people from the very beginning, hey, I don't have the money to be doing these things with my business, but I'm doing them.
Yeah.
If you guys are keen to support us, like, this is what it
board.
looks like. Let's win together. And like, I think that the more we start to do this, the better our ecosystem will be, because then small businesses and entrepreneurs and startups that are coming from anywhere in the country don't feel like they have pressure to be successful before they start to share their journey. And maybe we could learn from a lot more people, right? Like, I think we've been learning from the same sort of pool of people for too long. The same entrepreneurs are telling the same journey about their journey. It's like, wait, I want to hear new ones. I want to hear from the kid that like started a full-on technology startup from Soweto. Like, I want it like tomorrow, because it's possible. Because what do you need? A Wi-Fi connection and a computer. There's nothing holding us back. It's just that people are now feel, because of the pressure of social media, and like, take that shit off of you, right? Like, there's pressure on social media to look a certain way, sound a certain way, publish a certain way. Remove that thing from yourself. Like, step out of that, like, as soon as possible. Make sure that you understand that being your authentic self is the most important thing you can do, and start to tell your journey, because I'm telling you, there are people like me who are waiting to tell those stories, waiting to support those journeys, waiting to go into those communities and say, hey guys, we have something to help out with. So don't wait until you're successful, because success is relative also, right? Like,
true.
You don't know what I'm looking for in you. I think that the more we can just shed this idea that we need to be perfect before we share our journey, the better the ecosystem will be, and the more we can learn from each other, start to build really strong communities, and be able to, leverage each other in order to grow the right way. Communities accelerate growth.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Mash, Startup. Amazing work. Listen to his podcast. I read. So I asked him. I WhatsApped him a month ago. Was it last year? What equipment do I need for a podcast?
I gave you a dope list.
Go to Lutcha. Dope list. So it's the information that we're using for this podcast to make this happen. So I mean, if sitting there thinking, how do you make stuff happen? Tap into the community, build your own tribe, and I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you, bro.
Thank
You're
you,
doing
bro.
really important work.
Man, this guy.
I really hope people tell you that.
Sure.
It's important.
This guy. Thank you.
Important.
We out. See you next week, man. Thank you. That's it for today. If you like that podcast, show us some love and share it with your network. Once again, follow us on all of our social media platforms, #JoinUsForTea, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Shout out to Joe Public for making this possible. Remember, Sisonke Rikaufela and Foster Njengomzegezege.